Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin met Russia's Vladimir Putin after mutiny. Russian President Vladimir Putin met mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin after the failed Wagner group mutiny last month, the Kremlin says. Prigozhin, who heads the mercenary group, was among 35 Wagner commanders invited to the meeting in Moscow, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov added. He said that President Putin had given an assessment of the Ukraine war effort and the mutiny. The rebellion, launched on the 23rd of June, lasted only 24 hours. Under a deal to end the mutiny, which saw Wagner troops seize a city and march on Moscow, charges against Prigozhin were dropped and he was offered a move to Belarus. There had been very public infighting between Wagner and Russia's Ministry of Defense over the conduct of the war. Prigozhin had repeatedly accused the ministry of failing to supply his group with ammunition. But on Monday, Mr. Peskov said the Wagner chief was among the commanders who were invited to the Kremlin 5 days after the mutiny collapsed. The president gave an assessment of the company's actions on the front, Mr. Peskov is quoted as saying by Interfax news agency. He also gave assessment to the 24th of June events. Putin listened to the commanders' explanations and suggested variants of their future employment and their future use in combat. According to the spokesman, Prigozhin told Mr. Putin that Wagner unconditionally supported him. The Wagner chief's current whereabouts are unclear. 1. Wagner boss Prigozhin is in Russia, Belarus ruler says. 2. From Putin's chef to rebel-in-chief. 3. What is Russia's Wagner mercenary group? Last Thursday, Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko, who brokered the deal that ended the mutiny, said Prigozhin was in Russia. The BBC tracked Prigozhin's private jet flying to Belarus in late June and returning to Russia the same evening. The Wagner Group is a private army that has been fighting alongside the regular Russian army in Ukraine since last year's invasion. But following setbacks for Russia on the battlefield, Prigozhin took to social media to lash out at the high command. He has been particularly scathing about Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov, the two most senior figures running Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Prigozhin did not directly condemn Mr. Putin during the mutiny, but analysts described it as the biggest challenge to the president's authority in more than 2 decades in power. Meanwhile, General Gerasimov has been seen in public for the first time since the mutiny. There had been speculation that Wagner's march was cancelled in return for the general's sacking. However, footage aired on Russian TV on Monday shows him issuing orders for Ukrainian missile sites to be attacked. He is heard discussing recent events, suggesting that the video was filmed after the mutiny. The video suggests that President Vladimir Putin has kept both Mr. Shoigu and General Gerasimov in their posts. Dutch PM Mark Rutte to quit politics after government collapse. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has said he will quit politics after his coalition government collapsed on Friday in a row over asylum policies. After nearly 13 years in power, Mr. Rutte is one of Europe's longest-serving leaders. He is now heading a caretaker administration until fresh elections can be held in November. But he told Parliament he would not run for a 5th term in office and would leave politics following the elections. Dutch MPs will vote later on a no-confidence motion brought by the opposition in a bid to topple him. The Netherlands has had a coalition government led by Mr. Rutte and his conservative VVD party for the past year and a half, but the 4 parties involved have been split on migration for some time. The VVD had been trying to limit the flow of asylum seekers, following a row last year about overcrowded migration centers. His plans were opposed by junior coalition partners. 1. Dutch government collapses over asylum row. Once the new cabinet takes over after the elections, I will leave politics, said Mr. Rutte, adding that he had already informed party and parliamentary leaders. This is a personal decision and is independent of developments over the last few weeks, he said. The motion of no confidence has been filed by 2 left-wing opposition parties and the far-right party of anti-Islam leader Geert Wilders. But it needs the support of at least one of the parties in Mr. Rutte's collapsed coalition in order to pass. Until the events of last Friday, Mr. Rutte was seen as one of the wiliest survivors in European politics, even earning the nickname of Teflon Mark. During his time as Prime Minister since 2010, he has become renowned for his ability to emerge from political scandals with his reputation intact. Like many of his predecessors, he has a reputation for modest living, going to work and even the palace on his bike. His unassuming nature is perhaps epitomized by an incident captured on camera in 2018, when he accidentally dropped his coffee on the way into Parliament, then cleaned up the mess himself with a bucket and mop. After addressing Parliament, Mr. Rutte told Dutch media that he had mixed feelings about leaving politics. "This is not entirely without emotion," he said. "But it also feels good to pass the baton."